23 years ago this week, on July 6, 1998, WCW reached its zenith with the undefeated Bill Goldberg challenging Hollywood Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta in front of 40,000 fans, or as Tony Schiavone called them on TV, 39,000. I've never heard an announcer actually undercount the attendance. I've heard plenty of wrestling announcers exaggerate the attendance and round up. But I don't think I've ever heard of an announcer giving a lower figure than the actual number of people who were in the building that night. But this was the biggest crowd in WCW history for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. It was all downhill from here for WCW. Now, why give away such a big match like this on free TV and not on their Bash at the Beach pay-per-view 6 days later? Well, originally, this was not supposed to be a title match, nor was it supposed to be even airing on television. It was going to be a dark match main event for the Georgia Dome crowd only. But a couple of things happened. There were going to be a group of Turner executives in attendance for the show, so it would be a real coup for Hogan to be able to take credit for the large crowd that night, but also Nitro was getting clobbered by Raw pretty much every week at that point in the ratings. And this is when ratings really mattered to McMahon and Bischoff, and Bischoff especially. He was studying the numbers every week and lived and died by those television ratings. And they were in panic mode. They were looking for something big to draw an audience, and this was their shot, and it worked. Nitro beat Raw that night 4.4 to 4.0, with the Hogan-Goldberg match becoming the first quarter hour in cable television history for pro wrestling to crack 5 million total homes, which was good for more than 7 million viewers, to witness Goldberg's championship victory. This, to me, and I'd be curious to know if you guys agree with this analogy, but to me, this felt like WCW's Hogan-Andre. Only instead of the slam, it was the jackhammer. And Hogan this time was the one doing the honors. That's what this match felt like. That's what this match still feels like when I go back and I watch it. And the big crowd has a lot to do with that. You know, and Goldberg getting the big win in the end, and just seeing this enormous crowd erupt, and what a big moment it was for WCW. I look at that moment there as their Hogan-Andre. And the reaction when Goldberg won, to look out into that, just a sea of fans high-fiving each other and celebrating, was awesome. And then 6 days later, Hogan was in the main event, tagging with Dennis Rodman against DDP and Karl Malone, with Goldberg defending the title underneath against Curt Hennig. Goldberg's epic reign would continue the month after at the Road Wild pay-per-view, where he was again working underneath in a battle royal, while Hogan worked another celebrity tag team match in the main event against Jay Leno. In September, he wasn't even booked on the Fall Brawl pay-per-view, even though that didn't stop WCW from putting him on the artwork, on the cover artwork on the VHS, which would lead you to believe that he was on the show, but he wasn't. But guess who was? Guess who was in the main event? Hollywood Hogan. Halloween Havoc in October had Hogan against Warrior, second from the top, and Goldberg finally got to defend his title in a main event, only for the pay-per-view to run long, which caused, I think, most or all of the cable companies carrying the show to cut the feed right in the middle of their match. WCW had to replay it for free on Nitro the next night as a make-good. Fast forward to the World War III pay-per-view in November, and again Goldberg, the world champion, not booked. It's like Dennis Stamp. I'm not booked. I'm not booked, Terry. I'm not booked. And when Goldberg finally, at the end of the year, gets an uninterrupted main event at Starrcade, a big title defense on pay-per-view, Kevin Nash beats him and ends the streak. They gave Goldberg a Chris Jericho or CM Punk reign with the belt. Or maybe it's more appropriate to say that Jericho and Punk got Goldberg runs with the belt. But they at least got more main events than Goldberg did. 21 years ago this week, on July 9th, 2000, WCW held its final bash at the Beach pay-per-view, and it was not without controversy. Jeff Jarrett was to have defended his WCW championship against Hulk Hogan and retained, according to Vince Russo. Eric Bischoff has disputed this and said Russo's plan was overruled, and Hogan exercised the creative control clause in his contract to have the match finish changed to Hogan going over and winning the belt. And he was very fearful that Russo had no plans for him coming out of the show. What we know is that Jeff Jarrett laying down for Hogan to pin him and win the title was a work. We know that. As were Hogan's comments immediately after that, it's bullshit like this, why this company is in the damn shape that it's in. This was Russo trying to shock everybody into believing that it was a shoot when it was a work. That is, until it became a shoot later in the show, when Russo came back out and he cut a scathing promo on Hogan, unbeknownst to Hogan, who never approved such a promo and had already left the building. There's Russo in the ring on live pay-per-view calling Hogan a politician and telling the crowd that he played his creative control card. I mean, he may as well have just held up a friggin' sign that said, "This shit is fake." He said, "You'll never see that piece of shit again. The belt that Hogan took is now the Hulk Hogan Memorial belt because that belt don't mean shit." He said Jeff Jarrett was still officially the WCW champion and he would be defending the title later in the main event against Booker T. And he says, "Hulk Hogan, you bald son of a bitch, kiss my ass." Hogan would later sue Russo and WCW over that promo for defamation of character and breach of contract. Russo had his legal bills paid by Time Warner, and in exchange, he could not work for any other wrestling promotion, which was a provision that he got waived when Vince McMahon rehired him in 2002 for all of a week, which then paved the way for him to join TNA. The defamation portion of the suit, I know that was dismissed. I believe they settled on the breach of contract portion, though, in 2005. Overshadowed in all of this is that Booker T won his first of 5 WCW World titles that night. So he would wind up being the beneficiary out of all of the wackiness that happened that night. 20 years ago this week, on July 9th, 2001, with all plans for a WCW relaunch now completely abandoned, and Buff Bagwell fired, coming off the disaster of a main event the week before on Raw against Booker T, WWE decided upon a new plan. On Raw is War from Hotlanta, GA, Kane was set for a handicap match against the team of Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. Chris Jericho comes out and he offers to be Kane's partner. He wants to be a team player because remember, they're heading into an Invasion pay-per-view in a couple of weeks. By the way, this is why the entire angle I'm about to talk about even happened. They were in a panic after the WCW stuff fell apart, all the plans they had. They had an Invasion pay-per-view to try to get people to buy, and this was their way to try to get people excited. So Jericho offers to tag with Kane. Late in the match, Tommy Dreamer and Rob Van Dam do a run-in. They make their official WWE debuts, even though they had both appeared on Raw years earlier as part of the first ECW Invasion angle. They run in, they attack Jericho and Kane, and soon it's 4 against 2. Until the WWE stars storm down to the ring to make the save. Now, oddly, the WWE stars were all former ECW names. We see the Dudley Boys, we see Taz, we see Raven, we see Rhino, and there's Just Incredible. And soon they all turn at the same time to face Jericho and Kane, and they attack. 10 on 2. Jim Ross is flipping out on commentary. He's demanding that Paul Heyman explain what's going on. Heyman, who's been working as a WWE announcer since ECW folded, says, "You want to know what this is? You want to know what this is about?" And he gets up from the announce desk. He climbs into the ring. He grabs a mic, and he cuts this fiery promo. Calls Jim Ross a fat pig. He's tired of people talking about WWE against WCW when they've forgotten about the Tribe of Extreme. This invasion, he says, just got taken to the extreme. And at the end of the promo, they played the ECW theme song. WWE would go on to use the ECW logo and likeness, all of which they had no ownership rights to. It was still tied up in bankruptcy. But I guess they figured they were going to end up, owning the IP and the tape library at some point anyway, so fuck it. Let's just use it. But legally, they did not have the right to use any of that. This was a brilliant angle that made you think we were not only getting WWE against WCW, which is something every superfan had dreamed of, right? That we would one day have this interpromotional supercard or some kind of invasion between WWE stars and WCW stars. And not only might we get some version of that, but now you throw ECW into the mix as sort of the wild card renegade group. If they would have ended the show right there, it would have been one of the greatest Monday Night Raw endings of all time. But they could not help themselves. And less than an hour later, it all came crashing down. When the WCW stars and the ECW stars, who should have been kept apart and not friendly, they united as one. It was the birth of the alliance. Paul Heyman embraces Shane McMahon, and Stephanie McMahon is introduced as the new owner of ECW. Once again, making it all about the McMahon family. Making it all about Vince against his kids, as if we haven't seen this before. They squeezed about at least 6 months, maybe a year. I think I'm being generous when I say 6 months worth of television and storylines into 2 hours and hotshotted this angle all in a panic because they had an invasion pay-per-view to sell. And making Shane McMahon the owner of WCW, you remember the whole simulcast show, the name of the contract is McMahon, but it's not Vince McMahon, it's Shane McMahon, right? This big angle they did, and Shane is the owner of WCW. That had its merits. Because people like Shane, coming out of WrestleMania, the match with Vince and everything, he was the babyface of the family. He was the one that people liked. And if they wanted WWE fans to like WCW, who they would just, for years, they beat up on, they're the enemy, they're evil, they're the bad guys. If you wanted to try to get your own fans to like WCW, I can understand putting Shane McMahon with them. But putting Stephanie with ECW as the owner of ECW, that was a bridge too far. But really the issue is this. Here's the issue. When I talk about how badly botched the invasion, and it was, you may have liked the invasion, and I will sit here now and tell you that as compared to a lot of what we see today on WWE television, I would gladly take the invasion, okay? But put that on the side. If you like the invasion, good for you. The fact is, it was botched. It's not an opinion. That is a factual statement. And the issue is that when I talk about this, it's not about any one wrestler. It's not about any one match or any one pay-per-view or any one segment. There was a story to tell over the course of an entire year if they told it right. And they lacked the patience. And I understand that they couldn't get some of the names because they had these big contracts. They could have shelled out money perhaps for some of them, but you had all these big names that were sitting at home, so they were a little bit handicapped by that. But they had other names. Okay, and you see the way they treated some of them. They lacked the patience to do it the way that it deserved to be done. This was a once-in-a-lifetime angle that was dumped in their lap. They were handed a gold mine, and they flushed it right down the commode.